Let's get started.
Howdy, welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Unknown Secrets of Internet Marketing. I am your host, Matt Bertram. There's a lot going on in search today, so thank you for tuning in. I thought it would be good to bring in somebody that I highly respect and I've brought in to train my team. And I think there's so many things going on with LLMs. People forget that Google My Business owns a big part of the layout of the SERP, and I think it's one thing that SEOs I think understand to a good point, but it's getting missed in everything that's happening. So I wanted to bring in Brad Wetherall, former head of Google My Business, to tell us the real deal on how Google looks at things from a standpoint of the Google My Business, GMP, whatever you want to call it, GMB. It's hard for me to still say. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Yeah, it's funny that you're still having a hard time with the branding of GBP or GMB. It went through 5 different names over the course of like 15 years. So people still have a tendency to call it Google My Business. Even though it hasn't been called that in probably over 5 years now. So it's
well, when I say it, I like it, there's actually some additional like cognitive load that I have to like say it or do a slash, and like I think people understand, but it's not the right name.
It's funny too because like I was part of the team that actually chose to rebrand from Google My Business to the Google Business Profile. And the whole point of moving away from Google My Business is because no one knew what it was. It was very like it turned into a brand, but it wasn't very descriptive. And so when we were going through that exercise of renaming the product, our philosophy was just, let's just call it what it is. It's your business profile on Google. All right, Google Business Profile. There you go. It's obvious, right? And the irony is that everyone still refers to it as Google My Business. So we were really trying hard to rebrand it to be a little bit more obvious, and it hasn't really. It took a long time, I think, for people to get out of that GMB branding.
I think that Google Business Profile is the right name.
Yeah.
I just wish it was called that from the beginning. I think that's part of like, the internet's growing up, SEO's growing up, Google's growing up, and it's just a more professional name. Right. And so I think it is definitely more descriptive, and I think it was the right decision, and who knows why it didn't stick. But I know a lot of people listening have a lot of questions. I know that through the trainings we did, there was a lot of myths out there that I want to try to bust, because I still see today so much misinformation. Like I'm in a number of different SEO groups, and I always like to like see what people are saying, and I don't know. There's just a ton of false information. So let's kind of jump into it. I'm going to think back to the 2 trainings that we've done recently with the team. I'm going to actually ask another question, and then we'll walk into that, because I want to make sure I get this out there. For me, one of the things we haven't talked about is how Google My Business, the Google Business Profile, views link building and citations. That was something that we didn't talk about or cover, and I would love to kind of get your 1,000-foot view of that, and then maybe we can get into the weeds on that, and then we'll go over some other topics.
Yeah. I think that the complicated relationship, I think, that GBP or local SEO has specifically with link building and citations, it's an interesting one, right? Because it doesn't really influence rank that much, right? But what it does do is it increases data accuracy, or at least Google's philosophy of data accuracy. And I'll give you an example, right? So most people in the SEO industry know of the NAP, the importance of NAP, right? Like name, address, and phone number. And I think that for those businesses out there that are having a real hard time getting verified, right? And it's because Google doesn't really have any information to validate against. And so this is where link building and citations can be a benefit for you early on in your business's evolution. Is that if you do have an online presence before Google, right, like an established website, and your name, address, and phone number is represented through a variety of different citations, it actually streamlines the verification process. So instead of going through video verification, which is Google's now replacement for the old postcard verification method, if Google has something that it can lean into and verify, then you'll get real-time verification channels. So you'll get a phone or an email verification option available to you, where the point of verification is to verify two things. It's to verify the existence of both of the business and the existence of the business at its geographic location in the real world. So if it's a storefront business, it's not, does the business exist? But it's also, does it exist at that address that you say it exists at? So that both of those things are existence. And then the other thing is affiliation, which is like, are you authorized to represent that business? Do you work at that company, or are you just some bloke walking by, sees a sign on the side of the street, right? And so if Google knows something about you because you've invested in citations and whatnot and links and building up a great website, and it knows all that information about you, it doesn't have to confirm the existence part. It believes that already. It only has to confirm the affiliation part, which is why the real-time verification kicks in, and they only require an email or a phone number to validate that. Now, as it pertains to rank, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, my GBP business is up and running and it's all good. Does that actually improve the ranking? I haven't seen any evidence to support the fact that it does. But what it does do is it increases trust, right? Because like if you build all these citations where these third-party sources are referencing back to you, and they're saying like, yes, this is a legitimate business. In the event that those sources of information collects referrals or reviews, like a Yelp or any kind of like industry specific review platform, that does actually help with the authority and existence component of it. So I'm cautious to say that there is zero impact on rank through link building, but it's not the existence of the link itself doesn't predicate that you're going to perform better. It's kind of like, the other information that Google can extract from those sources of information, which, and with the introduction now of AI overviews and AI modes, it's more important about what that says about you, like the context of the citation, than it is to just have a citation in the first place. An example of this is like if you go out to like Yext or Uberall or any of these big companies, and they're like, we will get you in 100 different directories. And I'm like, of those 100 directories, 10 of them are probably good and the other 90 are just garbage, right? And so like it's a, from a Google authority and rank perspective, right? So like, my advice to a lot of my clients is, like, be selective at the directories that you invest in getting into, because they're not all created equal.
Yeah. Well, and also we're going to make sure that they're accurate every month, and we're going to charge you a boatload of money to make sure that each one of them doesn't get changed. That's
an important point. Sorry to interject, but that's an important point, right? Because if you make the commitment to invest in these directories and citations, it has to be consistent, right? If you've got different names, different addresses, different phone numbers, all kind of proliferated out across different sources, it actually works against you. So like, you need to make sure that if you're going to go with that strategy, that you're doing it right, and it does require management.
So a couple things that I wanted to talk about in there, and I do want to make sure we include the video verification process and that change. I think that was something that when we move locations and you helped us facilitate that, I think that was super valuable to a lot of people. But I do want to kind of go back to how you've been trained and what your outlook on like EAT, expertise, authority, trust, experience. Like, I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about just kind of what the lingo is inside of Google about trust and authority, and then people can make their own inferences. And then I want to dovetail that into when businesses or when people make suggestions. And I feel like, that is something that I want to definitely unpack. But I want to hear from you, like, okay, when you say trust, okay, what does that mean to you? What does authority mean to you? I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that, just in general. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I could use that term trust to talk about two different topics. There is trust in terms of I'm making an edit to my business. Google looks at every single edit that you make to your business profile and assesses it for risk, and this is really built over years of us observing like really malicious and fraudulent behavior that exists over, people really trying to take advantage of the visibility that Google gives businesses and exploit that for, malicious intent. And so, that's the reason that certain industries are more scrutinized than others. So actually years ago, like the GBP team invested in, internally we referred to it as the evolution of trust, or EOT. I mean, Google loves 3-letter acronyms, so like evolution of trust was EOT. And so the whole philosophy behind that initiative was, we're gonna make it easier for you to make edits on your profile. So instead of having a real high barrier to entry, right, like where we're going to force you to prove, very heavily, that you belong in that profile and are able to make edits. Instead, we're going to allow you to make simple edits, but if it triggers over a threshold, a risk threshold, then internally we would say we're going to make you jump through some hoops, right? We're going to make, and this is where the re-verification checks come in. And so what that translates to is that if you make what Google perceives to be risky changes, so this would be a change to the name of the business, the address, the phone number, the primary category, and the website. Those are the 5 core attributes that we have observed over the years as being the most risky in terms of people exploiting the system, right? And I've probably got a story that I could tell you for each one of those, of where like there was some level of fraud or malicious activity for each one. But just trust me when I say those are the things that they're paying attention to. So Google needs a differentiator now, right? Because it is normal that people will make a change to their phone number or address if they move, and so this is where the Evolution of Trust project really came into play, because it's like, all right, what is the change that is taking place on the platform, and how much do I trust the person who is making that change? And so there is this algorithm behind the scenes at Google that rates your level of trust, and you can build that level of trust by going in and suggesting edits or making edits to profiles, leaving reviews, adding photos to businesses, right? All of those activities, assuming that they are accepted from Google, will elevate your level of trust in the system, right? So the idea is that, I know this bloke, Matt. He's been editing GBP for 5-10 years, and he's always gives us good stuff, right? Like all the changes that he suggests, all the edits that he makes, they're all good. They positively contribute to the Google Maps ecosystem. It's like, so we trust Matt. So now, if Matt was to go in and make a change that was more suspicious, right? If you were to go in and change the name or the address or the phone number or any of these attributes that are higher risk, they're more likely to say, you know what, Matt, you're good. We trust you, right? And that's kind of the way that this trust threshold works. And so trust in the context of Google Business Profile is really around like, how much history do you have within your profile of making edits and changes? Or is that history representative of positive contributions, or is it resulting in rejections and whatnot, right? And so like the trust is a two-way street, right? It can go up and it can go down. So trust in that context is really about how much influence do you have over manipulating what Google says about a given business. If I was,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
no, you keep going. Keep going. I want you to finish the thought, but I do have something to ask you about that.
Right. So I'm just going to introduce the second part of trust, which is, so that's kind of like framework number one in terms of like the trust of your profile's ability to make a change and for Google to believe that you are giving them good information. And then the other part of trust is in the EAT acronym, right? Like the expertise, experience, trust, and authority. And this is different because this has an AI context to it. So now it's not, do I trust you to make an edit? Now it's that, okay, you've got information published on your website. How can I trust that to be true, right? It's like, oh, I read it on the internet. It has to be true, right? I mean, like Google is now in the information intelligence business, actually, right? So they've moved away and they're investing more in providing answers to questions instead of providing links to answers to questions. And this is a really big fundamental shift that Google is moving in, because it used to be that Google was the librarian that would point you in the direction of where the book was that you needed to find your answer. Now, Google is now the librarian that can just straight up tell you the answer so you don't have to read the book. And so that's the danger that runs in Google serving incorrect information, right? And we'll have to wait and see how this plays out in terms of liability of like providing false information, because Google is extracting all this information from various sources of the internet and serving it in the AI overview and in AI mode as their opinion, right? That's AI is saying, based on all this research that I've done, here is my result. And so who is liable to that? And so in order for Google to get ahead of that, they need to be able to trust the source of the information of where it's coming from. So trust in this case is more about like this website that I'm extracting this content from. Like, is that a reputable website? Like what do I know about this brand? What do I like? Is that referenced other places as being an authority on a particular topic? How do I know that this is something that Google's going to put their name on as they represent it in the context of AI? So this is where AI optimization, or I mean, there's about 30 acronyms for kind of like, AI, like what is it? AI optimization or LLM mode. Like there's all these funny, like, I don't know if there's really a proper acronym for this right now, but the thing that a lot of SEO companies are really trying to do is influence the way that your brand is represented in these large language models. And an interesting story on that actually is that I was leading the GBP team, and the product manager that was building what is now known as the AI overview. At the time, it was Search Generative Experience, or SGE. Again, 3-letter acronyms, right? So they came to me and they said, "Hey, we're gonna release this thing." We were piloting it internally at the time, and she said to me, like, "What are the businesses gonna say when we release this?" Right? She was trying to get a sense of the way that it was going to be perceived. And I said to her, our businesses on the platform are going to want 3 things. They're going to want to know how to get in the AI overview, how to get out of the AI overview, and how to change the information that's in the AI overview, right? To kind of ideally make it more flattering. And she turned to me and said, they're not going to be able to do any of those things, right? And because that's not how AI works, right? Like it's not a database that you can go to and says, oh, it says X, I'm going to change it to Y. It's all trained, it's all learned data. And so what that means for us is that we have to build authority in the information that we are representing, even about our own companies. So it's not good enough to just create content and throw it on your website. You also have to have that be represented in other parts of the internet so that you can increase your authority and trust, right, with Google, that you actually know what you're talking about, and that if they're going to reference your information and your website in AI, that the risk to Google is really low, that they're not going to get sued because it's incorrect information. So.
Well, you open up so many things. I'm like taking notes here of like, I don't know, you got a hard stop, but this could be a long one. So I wanted to make sure to call out something that it's really helpful to talk to you, because you identified questions when we were doing our training that the reviews, right?
Mhm.
Which reviews are one of the huge, like that, and the name of the business are the two most weighted factors for rankings.
Yeah.
That those reviews are actually tied to the individual. And
Mhm.
then you were talking about trust, and you were talking about making edits, and you were saying, well, that's like the local guide. I don't know all the different names of,
Yeah.
but like as you increase that, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that. And I feel like there's a lot of businesses out there, and there's a lot of individuals out there that might not be leaving reviews, that might
Mhm.
not be leaning into the ecosystem. And even the label in their Chrome, it doesn't identify who they are that's making these edits, right?
Yeah.
And so where do you see where do like so what does that amplification of trust look like? Is there any idea or anything you can share from a threshold standpoint or a recommendation best practice standpoint? But I almost feel like when you were talking, the owner of the business that's attached to the GNB, which they understand that relationship, goes back to kind of like Google rolled out authorship and pulled it back. And now authorship, I think, is really, really important today, and your money, your life, like categories, etc. Now, if you're making changes to your business or you're active in that community, it's tied to that individual. And then that
Mhm.
individual is managing this profile. So, just like Google says, you know, do not follow, doesn't matter, right? We're looking at everything. Like, is there like a relationship there? And should the people or the owners of the business be active in the community? And does that have any kind of impact in, eat? I don't know. It's just something when you were
Yeah.
talking made me think about that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to unpack there, right? So there's the value of reviews, right? And then who is leaving the review, the trust attributed to that person, because what I think what started this conversation, and for to bring everyone else up to speed, like there's a lot of challenges that a lot of businesses have when reviews disappear from their profile.
Yeah.
And if you're a company that's had that experience, you're probably also familiar with filing a ticket with Google support, and Google support is saying like, they're gone, I can't find them, right? And so there's an element of truth to that response. There's also an element of misinformation to that response. So the truthful part of that, and this is what Matt was saying a second ago, is that um, from a data architecture perspective, the review that is written is not owned by the profile that it's leaving it for. It's actually owned by the person who leaves the review. So what happens behind the scenes when Google suspects, like that the review is fake or whatever, it'll delete the connection between the user and the review and the profile, so it disappears. And so when you file a ticket with support, support is being truthful when they say it's gone, because the association for the listing doesn't exist anymore. So it's very difficult for the support agent to actually find the review to put it back. Now, the way to actually get it back is to actually either give them the name of the person who left the review or the text of the review, some additional piece of information that they can then use to do a lookup to find the person in the review that they left out of that data architecture. And once they found that, then they can reattach it.
So
But
is the review, even if it gets severed by algorithmically,
yeah,
is the review still on their profile? It's just not showing up. So then they can go look at the profile, they see it, and then they somehow reconnect it?
it's not on the profile.
Or
It's connected.
their individual profile is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. They're
So to the user
the
profile, right?
user
Not the
profile.
business
Sorry.
profile.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is still connected to the user. It's just
Mm,
not displaying, because the way it displays on the business profile doesn't display on the user
got
profile.
it. Yeah.
So it does exist. And so when they're saying, like, I've heard people say that, like, once the reviews are gone, they're deleted and they're gone forever. That's incorrect. That is not true. They can actually be recovered. The hard part is finding them, right? And so, like, if you use software, like, I don't know, like a lot of agencies will use management software. I actually partner with GMB API. It's
Yeah.
a kind of a pretty decent cost efficient solution for
multi-location,
multi-location.
yeah,
Correct.
multi-location.
You wouldn't want this for just one location.
Yeah.
But for multi-locations, this is really good. And one of the features, and this is fairly common across a lot of these software providers, is they will save a copy of all the reviews. So if they get deleted, you can go into the software and say, here are all the reviews that are missing. You can extract that, give that to Google support and say like, hey, recover all these things for me. And that's way easier for a support agent to recover if they know what they're looking for. So that's kind of like part one, is kind of like the architecture of reviews, right? And then, the other thing that I'll touch on quickly is the importance of reviews, right? Because if businesses are out there not asking for reviews, it's a big mistake from a future investment in growth. Because you said correctly a second ago that the biggest influencing factors in where you show up and where you rank on Google, specifically for local context queries, where the local package is rendered, is the name of the profile, right? So like if you happen to have personal injury attorney in the name of your business, you're going to show up for that keyword search. And then the second one is, I would throw primary category in there as well, because obviously the category of the business is incredibly important. But the third would be reviews. And so like you really need to get, this is like, if you think about it from this perspective, there's an opportunity for you to tell Google about your business. And that's kind of like what your GBP is. But then there's also an opportunity for other people to tell Google about your business. And that's what the reviews are. They're a third-party recommendation of your business. So it's a vote of confidence in your business. And so if you can get more reviews, right? Because the $1 million question I get is, how many reviews do I need, right? It's like, okay, I got it. Reviews are important. How many do I need? The simple answer to that is it depends on your competition, right? Because if you're in an industry where the norm is like 100 reviews per location, then you need to at least get 100 reviews to be competitive with that space. But if you're in an industry where 10 is the competition, then get 10, right? But the other thing that I'll note on reviews is that volume is really important, but frequency is more important than volume, right? So yes, get the amount of reviews that you need to be competitive in your space, but you have to get them consistently. If you have 500 reviews, but they're all from 5 years ago, Google's going to look at that and say, I don't know if I can trust that information. It's stale, right? It's old. But if you have 500 reviews from the last 3 months, you're going to be probably number one, right? Like on the ranking, because Google trusts that. It's not just what you're saying about your business, it's what other people are saying about your business. And so the value of reviews is just getting more and more important, especially as AI comes in as well, right? And in fact, in Europe, and I've seen, I haven't really seen a lot of experimentation with this in the United States, but in Europe, it actually sources reviews from other places. It's not just Google reviews that shows up on the GBP reviews. It sources it from like the equivalency of a Yelp, but like in different countries, right? And it sources different information of reviews. And I think that's an indicator for me that the investment in looking at third-party information is not slowing down. In fact, it's speeding up, and it's using that more and more for a vote of confidence in AI rank, as well as kind of like local and organic rank. The other thing that I'll say too is that the keywords in reviews is important as well, and it's been really interesting to watch this trend over time. And I think, Matt, I gave this example in the training that I did for your team, where I did a search in San Diego for a karaoke bar, and I got a bar that showed up. But there was no reference of karaoke bar in the GBP profile itself. It wasn't in the description or anything like that, but it showed up because it was referenced in the reviews consistently, where it's like, I went to this bar and they had great karaoke. So it's interesting how, like, even though the business themselves isn't kind of like promoting it as part of their GBP profile, the reviews is influencing that as a valid response. And Google is kind of like looking at the consumer opinion to influence what it serves. And so like it's another really important factor. Now coming back to trust, the other part of your question, right, is like, so, does trust in reviews hold more weight to others? Actually, not so much, right? I think it does and it doesn't. Let me put it that way. So, for example, if the review is being left by someone who has created their Google account 10 years ago and they're pretty active with it, they use it every day, and then they come in and they leave a review, then there's a high degree of trust of that profile, of that user profile of that Google account. What we found is that when reviews was kind of like really prevalently used for spam, right, like where you could buy reviews, a lot of the times there was some telltale signs that it was a fake review. Like, for example, the Google account was created yesterday, and then all of a sudden we've noticed that they've gone in and left 5 reviews, all in the same geographic area, all for plumbers, and 4 of them were negative reviews and 1 of them was a positive review. Now, that's obviously fake, right? Because it's a brand new Google account, no history with it. The activity that they can see on the account is very suspicious. So all 5 of those reviews will get pulled down for suspicious activity. Now, the complication with that is that the companies who are out there selling reviews know that. And they know that, like, if they were to do that practice, all the reviews are going to get pulled down immediately and they're not going to make any money. So they mine Google accounts, right? Where they create Google accounts, they use it a little bit every day to try and trick the system into believing that it's a real person. And then when they get an order in that says, oh, I want 100 reviews on this business, they use those accounts that they've been mining over time to influence that. So our engineers have been pretty rigorous on fighting these guys, right? Like, and finding new techniques and new ways of detecting fraudulent activity. And so that's kind of where, like, trust is kind of, it's an interesting discussion in this context, because it is used to kind of like, drive reliability in the data that is represented. But because the bad guys are getting more sophisticated, it means sometimes a lot of like legitimate listings get caught in the net, right? Because the bad guys are smart. And if only they could use their powers for good and not evil, like, we'd be fine. But like, it's just, it's a constant battle of fighting people trying to get around the system.
So many things I want to respond with to that. I actually wanted to ask you, in that note, can you speak to how Google views fake reviews, and like, what is the repercussions of people engaging in that? Like, is there criminal, because like, there's probably a line somewhere that you have a better handle on than I do of, like, we won't do that. We won't, like, there's been clients that in the past have had, hey, like, and I'm like, hands off. We're not touching that. And I feel like there's some kind of consumer issue too of misleading people, right, about a product. If you're leaving a bunch of, so where is the line that Google has, and where's like the line of like, if you're engaging in this behavior, it could be against the law at a certain threshold too, I would think. So
yeah, no, it's a great point. Now, I might broaden the conversation a little bit to include all kind of like fraudulent activity. So like, reviews is one part of it. Fake listings is another one, right? Like, where you're creating lead gen type listings where the business doesn't exist. You're really just trying to canvas the map to acquire leads. And so both of those things are kind of like both looked at internally from the trust and safety organization. There's a whole team in Google that is focused on this. And in the context of fraudulent listings, there is some legal implications to that. And we have actually partnered with the FBI to take down, I mean, it was a conspiracy of kind of like coordinated effort to kind of canvas a map with fake listings and then go in and defraud people. I think that the locksmiths are kind of like the most famous user journey there, where it usually is someone in a business that's in a duress vertical, right? Like, a duress meaning, I'm locked out of my house in New York in the snow and I need a locksmith now, right? It's like an immediate need. And so they pull up their phone, they go to Google, They get the closest locksmith that has a great ad on their business that says, like, hey, I'll be able to pick your lock. It'll be $20 in 20 minutes. And it's like, awesome. That's exactly what I need. But then when they show up, their script is usually something like, oh, you've got like a really great lock on your system that's impossible to pick. Kudos to you for being so security conscious. Like, and they're like, so the only way that I have to do it is I have to drill out the lock and then put on a new lock instead, right? And so, of course, that's complete BS. Like it could have been picked by a real locksmith. These guys just don't have that skill set. Internally at Google, I used to call them dudes with drills, right? Because they would just rock up, drill out the lock, and then sell you a new one for like $800. Then they bought it at Home Depot for $20. And so it's just bad behavior, right? And so for some types of conspiracies like that, we actually did get law enforcement involved to try and bring down these large kind of like large scale, like organizations that are doing this at scale to protect the consumer base. As it pertains to reviews, I haven't been personally involved, nor do I know that we actually involved in legal action. But what we have done, and I haven't seen this roll out again in the United States, but it has in Europe, where people get blocked from reviews, right? So like businesses will get blocked from reviews. So the idea would be, if you are paying for reviews for your platform, or paying for negative reviews for your competitors, and Google detects that that's what's going on, they will lock down your profile. First of all, they'll remove all the reviews for violating policy, so you don't get the benefit of the reviews. And then secondly, they'll say your business profile is not eligible to collect any reviews for 90 days, right? And so it'll lock you out for a period of time. And so in the past, it was like, I'm going to remove the reviews and then just call it a day. Now there's some repercussions to it. And so my advice to businesses out there that understand the value of reviews and are perhaps even contemplating like, hey, I just need to get a jump start, let me just buy some reviews. I'm like, the risk is not worth the reward, right? I think that you can just as easily get legitimate reviews into your platform, and the effort required to get those legitimate reviews is not worth the damage that it would cause if you get all your reviews removed and then flagged in the system where you're blocked from collecting any reviews for 3 months or more. So I just, if I was to look at it and if I was to advise clients on this, I'm like, it's just not worth it. Like, I think that there's other places that you can invest your time and money that is going to yield a better response for you. And, Google is cracking down on this because, that the trust and safety team take it personally. In fact, I was chatting to an engineer, it was probably 10 years ago at this point, but I was chatting to him and he kind of had this interesting philosophy when it came to fighting spam. And he said that, at the moment you can buy a fake listing. You can go out onto the internet and you can say, all right, I want to buy, I want you to verify my business for me and I'm going to pay for it. And it's going to be, like $20 per listing to get it verified. And then a couple months later, that same company was charging $100. And then a couple months later, it was $500. And the engineer's like, that's me doing a good job, right? Like, as the price goes up, that means I'm doing something right, because it's getting more and more difficult to actually commit this fraud, right? And so it was an interesting way that he was kind of like judging his own performance, and the market rate of a fake listing was actually one of his criteria for performance.
Okay, so I have so much. So they're sunsetting the Google My Business, the FAQ section, potentially. And I would love for you to kind of talk about what that intention was, how people are using it, the benefit of that, and then, what might likely happen from that. And then I would love to also talk about like categories, because I think there's a lot of questions about, okay, there's that main category, but all those other categories, how should you think about that?
Yep. Great. All right. Well, let's start about the Q&A section, right? Also known as the FAQ section. So it was created years ago to influence engagement. And this is actually another important piece of information on the history of the evolution of GBP, because the philosophy at Google is that activity on a listing is a proxy for data quality, right? The whole philosophy was, if you built your GBP profile 5 years ago and have never touched it, Google doesn't know if it's still accurate, right? So the data quality of that listing is a variable. But if a business owner is going in there and they're doing something in the profile once a month, right? Like that was the measurement that we had. We actually had a goal to get to 100 million 28-day active users on the system. Right. Now that was a pretty big goal, because I think at the time we were at 10 million. I think when I left, we're probably closer to like 30 million. They're probably a lot larger than that now. But the objective was get business owners using their profile more frequently. Once a month was the guide, right? Because, you know, activity on the listing was a proxy for data quality. And we were like, okay, if they're in there looking at stuff, then chances are they would fix any issues that they identify when they're in there looking at other stuff. So you know, Google built a lot of these engagement features, right? Like they built Google Posts, they built you know, like the ability to reply to reviews, you know, like, and they built the Q&A section, right? Like, and that's or FAQ, however you want to refer to it. And I think that the intent of that was allow users to interact with the profile, right? So they can ask questions, the business owner can reply to those questions. And, you know, this particular field too had some rank implication benefits to it, right? So like you could kind of like drop keywords in there, because it was similar to that of reviews, where it's kind of like, you know, it's interaction with the consumer, with an end user. And that interaction with a user has a certain amount of weight to it in terms of engagement and how visible your company is being with engaging with the general public. And so there was some inherent benefits to that.
Yeah. So Brad, that is different though than posting, because you're just pushing information out. So you're
Correct.
viewing interaction, like with the reviews and the FAQs, different than posting.
That's
I want
right.
to so I just want you to speak to that too.
You're exactly right. And while reviews and Q&A did have ranking benefits, posting does not, right? Because posting was designed to kind of, it's more of a conversion factor than it is a ranking factor, right? And so like once people find your listing, having the posts on your listing, it's visual in nature, right? So like, you know, you put your imagery up there. It's kind of like a mini blog, right? So instead of having the blog sit on your website, you post it there. And it's more about conversion. It's like once they find your listing, what information can you give them that entices them to take the next step in that action, to go to your website, to make a phone call, to, you know, interact with your business. So, and I think that's a really interesting observation that you had, is that like the motivation was different from posts from day one, right? Which is probably why it has less implications from a ranking perspective. But the reviews and the Q&A is more about consumer engagement. I wasn't at Google when the decision to sunset that feature was made. My guess, however, is that Google is looking at the data and they're saying that there isn't actually a lot of interaction with consumers in the Q&A section. What it's mostly being used for, and I'm guilty of this, I actually recommended this to a lot of my clients, is I'm the one that write the questions and then I write the answers, right? So it's I'm seeding questions that I want consumers to see, and then I'm proactively answering it. And if Google is, if that behavior is systemic, right? Like where every business out there is using it for the same purpose, then it's not being used for the purpose by which it was designed, right? It's not actually that level of engagement. So there's that, and there's also the a potential argument where they just don't want to spend engineering resources maintaining it. Right. And it comes down to a cost conversation. And so I have seen a lot of features turned off Business messaging is a good example of that, where that was a feature that was used heavily by agencies. It was turned off not because it wasn't used or wasn't effective. It was turned off because they ran out of resources to invest in the product, and they had to prioritize, and they wanted to sunset that feature so that they could reinvest the resources into different areas of the business. So not a great answer for, like, because it's a kind of a silly reason to turn off a popular feature, but that was the truth of it. That was kind of like why that was sunset. So I don't know if Q&A is being sunset for resourcing purposes or for usage purposes. It's probably a combination of the two, to be honest. They're probably looking at the features and saying it's either not being used or it's being misused. It's potentially expensive from an engineering perspective to maintain. We're just going to cut it.
What's the date on that potentially?
Like, I don't know. I've been hearing that for a while, and I still see it. So it appears as though it's not a huge priority. They haven't turned it off. And the news that the desire to shut it down is also not new. That's been around for a while. So I don't have a date, but while it still exists, I'm still going to use it because there are still ranking implications that can benefit your business profile.
Yeah. So let's go to the categories. I do have a hard stop on the half hour.
Yep.
But also talk about photos and the proper way to do photos. I want to make sure we cover that. So.
Yeah. Photos is another great example of user engagement. Actually, it's business engagement, not user. So it's a way to make sure that you're maintaining a good, accurate profile. And so, photos is another one of those things where, the more photos you have, the better, but it's frequency versus volume is the value. Again, similar to that of reviews. So what you should avoid is having a look at your business profile, being like, hey, I've got this, I've got an album of 1,000 photos. I'm just going to upload all 1,000 of them at the same time. It's not going to really give you much benefit. What you really want to do is drip those photos into your system. Every couple of weeks, drop a new photo. If you can have your customers include a photo in the review, that's huge as well. The other best practice when it comes to photos, and this would be a good recommendation for people who are dealing with suspensions or anything like that, is that a lot of the photos that you would typically use as evidence in reinstating your listing, so photos of the exterior of the building, the interior, the signage that you have, right? Like the tools that you use, proactively put that in your listing as photos, right? Because Google has that now at their fingertips, and it's more suspension prevention than anything else, because now it already can see a lot of the evidence that you would need to use to unsuspend it anyway. So just be proactive and get that into your profile and avoid the potential headaches down the road. The other advice that I would give you is that if you're taking photos with your phone, which almost everyone does these days, have the geolocation feature turned on, right? So like it drops the latitude and the longitude into the metadata of the photo itself. So when you're uploading the photo, it's not just the content of the photo that Google is looking at, it's the metadata. So it knows, oh, here is a photo of this plumber doing this thing in this location. And so the location now that's going to help you from a ranking perspective in the location of where the photo was taken. Google has this internal system. We refer to it as MUM. It's a multi-list unified model or something like that. It's a fancy word. All it really means is Google can understand photos and read and listen to videos. So it's not just, and this kind of comes back to your website data as well, right? It's not just about the words you use. It's about the videos and the photos that you're using as well. And so just to make it easier for Google, have your photos be geocoded. And the higher quality you can give in a photo, the better, because it's easier for the algorithm to interpret. I was chatting to this one business owner a couple of weeks ago, and he said that he was able to do a search for a restaurant that has a full bar, right? And he got a result that showed, a restaurant with a full bar, but similar to the review scenario, there was no mention of a full bar in the profile. The only way that he inferred that they got that is there was a photo on their profile that had a picture of the bar behind them, and Google was able to infer that they have a full bar because of the photo that was contributed. So it's another example of how it's not just the words that you use, but all of the multimedia assets as well is going to be a really important factor.
All right. So I have, we don't have a lot of time here. I want to ask you one more question. And then I have like a dispelling something that you shared with me that I think would be beneficial about utilizing the website, right? Like the little website function that got sunsetted.
Yeah.
And the backstory on that. Well, we don't have to spend too much time on that, but I want you to spend some time on the categories, like just how to look at that, because there's a lot of categories in there under your main category. Then tell me a little bit on the website sunsetting, because I've been asked a lot. I've heard a lot of different things. And then one unknown secret about internet marketing, and then we'll share your information and get out of here. But I want to make sure to talk about the website that was sunset, not for too long, but I feel like that was a big topic of debate with a lot of SEOs. So
yeah, it's a fun story too. So all right, I'm going to try and time box this. So apologies if I'm short. So let's start with categories. So categories, I mentioned this earlier, probably the second most important factor of rank after the name of the business. And I would put that slightly above reviews as number two. It's just a critical way for Google to know the type of service that you offer. So when people do keyword searches, it knows that this is the type of business that would provide that service. So the primary category is the most important strategic thing that you need to choose. Secondary categories are also incredibly important. The risk you run with secondary categories, though, is that they need to be related to the primary category. If they are completely different, right? So if you're like, I'll give you a positive example first. So if you're a lawyer and you're the main area of practice for you is personal injury, right? There is a category for personal injury lawyer, but there is also categories for lawyer and law firm and other types of law, like criminal lawyer and things like that, right? So there's all these different types. The strategy would be go with the primary area of focus that you have. So go with personal injury attorney as number one, and then you can add on lawyer, law firm, family law, immigration, all the other things that you may do, but they're just not your primary focus. The risk from adding secondary categories is if you add unrelated categories. So if you're like personal injury attorney, and then you add a secondary category of plumber or restaurant, right? That works against you. Google sees that as spammy behavior. And it's actually it might suspend you or at least kick you into re-verification because it's just weird, right? Like now it might be that you happen to do a restaurant as well as being a lawyer, but it's unlikely, right? And so I think that, and if that was the case, you'd probably be better off creating two listings for the separate primary categories than you would to have one of the primary. So that would be my advice. The other thing that I would tack on to categories though, in the interest of time, would be there's a services section of the GBP profile where it gives you the opportunity under each of the categories that you've selected to go in and describe the services that you perform under each of those categories. You absolutely need to do that. That is something that will impact rank. It's something too that you would want to try and optimize for the service and the location. So if you've got multiple locations, you want to kind of drop in, I'm a personal injury attorney in Houston, Texas. Or if you've got a different listing in Austin, I'm a personal injury attorney in Austin, Texas. You have to tweak it for each one because that's going to have a benefit from a rank perspective. So I'll leave that there in the context of categories, but obviously that's a topic we
just touched the surface on a number of these items. Yeah, for sure. So,
all right. So the next one is the websites feature, which is a fun story for me to tell because if you like internally, we call this Presto. So if I refer to it as Presto, I apologize. But the concept was we were trying to drive engagement in developing markets, right? When engagement, was the main motivating factor. And so we were looking at India and Brazil and Indonesia and a bunch of these companies, and we're like, they're not using GBP. And so we had people go out into those markets and ask them, like, hey, we want to get you up on, we want to create a Google business profile for you. I think it was Google My Business at the time. And their response to us was, we don't need to be on Google because we don't have a website, right? And we were trying to explain to them that you don't need a website, right? Like, the business profile is your business representation on Google. You don't have to have a website to be on Google, and it'll just get you more customers. And we were trying to sell, but the concept was just lost on them, right? And they didn't understand that they didn't need to. So the engineers just said, bugger it, we're going to go ahead and create a website for you.
Now, was that a ranking factor? Like, how would you have viewed that? Because people are like, if I have a website, do I create this too? Or like, was it beneficial to not do that? Like, what would you have recommended if someone asked you that? And that was,
so this is the interesting part of the story, right? So like the initial philosophy of Presto was to create websites in these developing markets for companies that weren't online. And we were trying to establish more of Google as a source of information where people would go to kind of like understand where they could go and get goods and services. What we found is that when we launched that feature, all these other developed markets also created these websites, right? And I think this is where it exactly is what you were talking about, where they were like, hey, I know I already have this website, but Google's telling me to get another website. Let's just create another website, and that will help from a ranking perspective. Now, the truth of the matter is that was not the way that it was designed. It was never designed to replace your website. It was really designed to be the primary website for your listing. But the cool thing about it was that the engineers designed it to be uber mobile friendly, because a lot of these developing markets, the norm was not to use a desktop or a laptop. The norm was to use a mobile device. And so it was optimized for mobile. And so this was also 10 years or so ago, where it was like, okay, that was, like a big trend. And so a lot of companies in the US and Canada and developing markets really kind of like piled onto this. Now, this is where I don't know. I don't know if that actually had positive ranking implications to it. I'm skeptical that it did. Now, it may have unintentionally, because the team that built the websites feature in GBP was not the team that was optimizing search, right? They were doing it for a certain purpose, and that purpose was to increase engagement in the developing markets. It wasn't designed to improve rank or to solve a problem in these developed markets. So that could have been a really interesting side effect, where like it's like, hey, now you've got Google has a website that it's hosted on Google's platform. Like it's you could argue it was a good authority signal before AI even existed, or at least before AI was a search feature, at least. But I think it was unintended. I don't think it was by design. Now, all of this is for naught because that feature got sunset. Yeah. And the reason why it was turned off is because the leadership at the time was saying, we've got this Google business profile that we're really trying to turn into a page, right? A business profile page for a business. But we also have this Presto site, right? Like this website that we've created out of the GBP data. So it's a duplicate, right? Like it's, where it's redundant information being served in two different ways. So they said, well, let's get rid of the website, right? The Presto site, in favor of GBP being the primary source of information. And so I think that's where it brings us to today, where, and I think we're even seeing the benefits of investing in GBP, because I personally see the data in AI mode over-indexing GBP data, right? I think that I would argue the primary source of information about a business is being pulled from GBP right now. Now, will that persist forever? Probably not. But it's currently, if you were to experiment with AI mode and look up different sources of information, it pulls in GBP data directly, and it references a lot of the information that is represented in the profile itself. So at least for right now, that should be a great investment in ensuring that data is accurate and says what you want it to say about your business.
So in AI mode, GDP is not going anywhere, right? Like
No.
that is a fixture that you need to focus on. All right, Brad, we're coming to the close here. I wanted to hear from you out of kind of everything. If we were to sum up, what is one unknown secret of internet marketing as it relates to local SEO? What would be the number one thing?
I don't know how much of it is unknown, but I think that what's different today than compared to internet marketing from 5 years ago, even maybe 3 years ago, is the importance of brand mentions versus links, right? And I think that the old school way of doing SEO is link building and getting connections into other websites. Because of AI and the investment in AI, Google is smart enough that they don't need the link to draw the connection anymore. The brand mention is good enough. So going out and getting the name of your business and your brand represented in other authoritative sources is going to have an exponential return as AI continues to take over the search landscape. So that would be, I don't know if it's a huge secret. I hear a lot of people talking about that, but I would double down on it because it's, we even heard Elizabeth Reed, who's the VP of search. I actually worked with her directly, and she used to be the engineering director of GBP back in the day. And she was the one that was on stage at Google I/O talking about the evolution of search. And she used phrases like, "This is the future of search." And I know Liz, and like she wouldn't use those words lightly, right? And so like it's definitely future proofing your business to invest in your brand mentions. I don't know that I would quite give up on backlinking and linking yet, but it's phasing out, and media mentions are becoming the new backlinks.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Brad. I have some ideas about really getting into the weeds on some strategy, and there's a lot that we haven't covered. So may want to try to bring you back on again. And we do have some mastermind workshops that I would love to get you involved in as well. What is the best way if someone like what they heard and they want to contact you directly? Maybe they have a location change or something like that they want to make sure it's handled with finesse. What's the best way to get in touch with you and follow?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. So I'm working in dual capacity right now. So obviously I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements and whatnot, but I'm also working as the chief operating officer for a company called Esquire Digital. There's the logo there, Esquire Digital. It's a company that focuses on search marketing essentially. And I'd be happy to talk to you, take any consultations. You can also find me on LinkedIn, just linkedin.com/Brad Wetherall. Reach out to me there, and yeah, I'd be happy. I have a bunch of clients that have very interesting challenges. So thanks for having me again, mate. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you're looking for more assistance.
Awesome. Well, everybody, hopefully you enjoyed this. Keep it up. I know things are changing fast. Reach out to EWR Digital if you're looking for more revenue in your business. Follow what I'm doing online. The mastermind group is coming for all those that keep asking. Until the next time, my name is Matt Bertram. Bye-bye for now.